time to get this trendy session started. So welcome to CSL in Session, Trends in Libraries. My name is Christine Krieger, and I am the Professional Development Consultant for the Colorado State Library. Before we get started with the true stars of the show, I want to briefly introduce CSL in Session in case you haven't had an opportunity to attend before. You may be familiar with webinars where you kind of get talked at for an hour. If you're in Colorado, maybe you're eating your lunch right now. It's a little early for lunch still, but we like to shake things up and kind of get a conversation started. So as we go through today's session, we're going to be asking you to engage in a variety of ways. And of course, we also welcome any questions or comments that you might have as we go through. The main way that you will be communicating today is via the chat, and most of you have used the chat to introduce yourselves already. If you haven't had a chance to, feel free. If you need to get a hold of me for any reason, your technology is not working right, etc., if you go all the way up to the top, under presenters, or I'm sorry, under hosts, where it says Colorado State, if you hover over that, you can send me a private message and I will try to help get you connected. We are also recording today's session, and the recording will be available hopefully within a couple hours on Libraries Learn. And we also have live captioning for today's session, and you can turn the captions on or off as you see fit by using the CC button kind of in the middle of the screen at the top in that black bar. You also then can move the captions around. You can change the size of the captions, whatever you need during today's session. So it is my pleasure to introduce our presenters for today. We have Sharon Morris, who is the Public Library Leadership Principal Consultant for the Colorado State Library, and Kieran Hickson, who is the Rural and Small Library Consultant, also with me at the State Library. So I'm going to turn it over to you guys.
Hi there. My name's Kieran. And I'm really glad y'all came here today. And I'm curious as to what motivates you to attend something on this topic. So if you don't mind, if you can put into chat um, what interests you about this topic, that would be awesome.
That's great. And as people are putting that in, I'll introduce myself as my voice anyway, as Sharon Morris. I'm just going to go over the outcomes and the agenda that we have for today. Well, by the end, you'll be able to identify trends that are impacting libraries. Certainly not all the trends, but we've selected about 6 to raise awareness of, and those are in your field guide, which is linked in the trend handout area. And then you will get the opportunity to analyze trends from multiple lenses, from library operations, from library services, and from how the value is perceived in your own community, and then gain new resources to explore trends into the future. So the way that looks is we're going to explore a couple of trends: growth mindset and guest experience, using those 3 points of views. And then together we're going to do that. And then on your own, we'll give you these other ones that you can explore, and we'll summarize that. So it's going to be a very interactive session. We're going to use a lot of different technologies. But when we talk about trends, I don't know, Kieran, what is your thought on trends?
Well, I was just remembering back in, like 2007, I was working at the John C. Fremont Library in Florence. So it's a small library in a rural community. Um, and I have always liked gaming, video games and such. And we had a patron who donated a whole lot, and we'd started to kind of circulate like the cartridges and the discs and such. And we thought, we should have a program. It's a trend that we've seen in bigger libraries, but we don't know if we can pull it off because we don't have like a lot of space. We don't have more than one, TV. Like, how would we do it? We figured it out and did it. And again, this is a small community, and we had it on a Saturday when the rest of the library wasn't open. We opened the door, and there were 30 kids out there. 30 kids, and that was a huge program for us, and we were letting them game, and we had, like, the Dance Dance Revolution and, like, shoved up in a corner. It was kind of awkward. Um, and my coworker who was in charge of programs, turned to me and was just like, like, "Oh my gosh, this is so popular. We're gonna have to do it again someday." And there was a kid near us, and he didn't hear someday, he heard Sunday. So he turned and he was like, "Tomorrow we get to do this again tomorrow?" And he was so excited. And we realized that we had hit on something that did work for our community and was something that we could pull off. So it was yeah, when I think about trends, that's the one that comes to mind for me.
I love that story for so many reasons, but it's just sort of like some people, when something new comes out, they're like, oh, it's a fad, it'll pass. And other people see it as a trend. So, one thing that we like to do is suggest looking at things that are new and upcoming through multiple lenses. And so, the three lenses that we like to do in particular to suggest for libraries, these 3 points of view are behind the scenes, using kind of the model of the theater, behind the scenes, on the stage, and on the marquee. And so what that looks like in libraries is like, how could we potentially leverage this trend to make positive and important changes in how we work together to make the library run effectively? On the stage is sort of like, what is the experience of the people using our library, and how might we leverage the trend to empower them more? And then on the marquee is like, is this a trend that over time can really add value from the perspective of the people that use the library, fund the library, that sort of thing. So the marquee is more about kind of the public awareness and public value of the library.
All right. And again, if you want, above the chat box, there's a trend handout, and it's the Field Guide Trend CSL in Session fillable PDF. Feel free to download that. If you did download it on page 3, the first trend we're going to kind of talk about is the growth mindset. And at first, I'm just going to define it just a little bit before we get going with it. So the difference between a fixed and growth mindset, really quickly, is folks with a growth mindset believe their abilities can be developed and improved over time, and in a fixed mindset moment, you believe that your abilities are innate and can't be changed. And an example of this, like, it's not that you are one or the other. It's more like, like for me, cooking seems like I don't it's some sort of black art. I don't know how people do it. I can barely boil water. And I have kind of a fixed mindset about it. It's like, yeah, I'm not gonna try. Like, I don't even know. Like, I tried to make Jello the other day and I spilled it all over the floor. Like, I'm just a disaster in the kitchen. But music, absolutely am horrible at music, and I love trying. And I play the guitar, and I've been playing the guitar for 25 years, and I still am horrible at it. And I don't care because I'm just going to keep doing it because I love it, and I believe I'm going to get better, and I kind of have. So um, if you want, just kind of glance at that on page 3, and you can put into to chat something that strikes you, or something that you can relate to. For me, and it's not on this slide, there's one about potential, and it says that potential is expanded by collaborating with others, and I feel that really, really a lot. That's a big one for me. That's part of my growth mindset moments. Is it's always better with a buddy.
I love that. That's so great. And, this has been such a revelation for me because I was sort of raised with this, like, everybody either meets their own potential or not, kind of on their own, like the lone person. And the research is really staggering about how we are better together, right? So
Yeah, and
let's
did you
go ahead, Kim.
I don't I'm sorry, I'm totally interrupting. I was just reading this thing from Harvard Business School, and it said that a fixed mindset can physically prevent you from learning from your mistakes. And that really, like, I was shocked by that. Like, to to prevent me from learning from my mistakes just because I went in with to it with a fixed mindset. Anyway, okay, sorry.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that. And Courtney kind of has reinforced that in the chat area. Thanks, Courtney. So, you know, this really comes out of the research by Carol Dweck in the 1990s and her book on mindsets. So you might be familiar with it. Really started to manifest in terms of education, in particular K-12 education, and then moving into higher ed as a mechanism for sort of like, you know, adding the word yet, for example, at the end of when student says like, I didn't finish, or I haven't figured it out yet. And so that just adds the possibility that you can keep trying and putting more effort towards things. And effortfulness is part of a growth mindset. And what we saw in the original research is that when kids challenge themselves more, and they work harder, and they are able to kind of achieve that next level of growth, it actually increases their potential and their capacity later. So in the K-12 environment and in higher ed, this idea of approaching learning from a growth mindset has been really instrumental in educational circles for a long time. And let's start thinking about it from a library perspective.
All right. So we're going to turn on a whiteboard. Is that correct, Christine?
Yes, we are. And let's see.
And you can see here, this is like when we're looking at the behind the scenes part of this trend, the library's internal culture. This is our continuum, and we're going to use the whiteboard, and Christine's going to tell us how. And I just want you to mark where your library culture fits in that kind of fixed growth mindset continuum. Like,
Okay.
okay, yeah.
So hopefully right next to where the participants' names are, you see sort of a vertical bar. And up near the top, kind of where like it says activity your library, you should see a little pen. Are people seeing, or a marker? If you hover over that, it's a marker. And then you can pick what color you want. And you can like cha-ching. Are people seeing that? And if not, let me know in chat.
Oh, cool.
There we go.
Okay. To see them. I love that the colors kind of go with the growth being green. That's awesome. So it's kind of in the middle.
Yeah.
With the variety.
Few people are heading towards growth. Few people are towards the fixed.
And you can ignore the big red check that I put in. I don't know why I put it there. So the state library is not a fixed mindset.
Yeah, but somebody else replicated it. So
yeah.
Yeah, and so part of the question here is like, what does it look like? Maybe in the chat area you can share. What does it look like to have a growth mindset for those of you who have that in your work environment, so that those who don't can kind of start to conceptualize what that looks like, that kind of support for mistakes as opportunities, and you know, the fact that like additional effort means that things are going to improve, or other parts of the growth mindset, and how that looks like in your work and how you work with each other as colleagues, how your supervisor, others treat you. It'd be interesting to hear, so that we can kind of get ideas for those who don't have it as much.
I see several people are typing.
I love that. Encouraged to try, even if you might fail. I don't even think fail is a real word. It's like a construct of a fixed mindset. That's my... Okay, I'm stepping off my high horse on that one, but I really feel passionately about that.
And Crystal's saying that after a program or a project, her department makes a remember for next year document with ideas for improvement, growth, and fixing mistakes. I love that, reflecting on, you know, what went well.
That's awesome. And it's just like right afterwards, and it's sort of part of your practice. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
It gives that reflective practice a little bit too. Yeah.
And Kate says, trying out new programs and new tools, assessing and reflecting what is working and what can be updated.
And I think that's important, Kay, because it's like we need to have time to just experiment and explore with things. It doesn't all have to be a product by the end of it.
And April says that her library is part of a consortium system, and she thinks that her library works to have a growth mindset for collaboration, better together. But they face challenges of working together, and it's always been done that way. Yes.
Interesting. Yeah.
And I find, so I've been at the state library for 15 years now, and I find sometimes like I can find myself almost kind of slipping, not necessarily, I don't know if it's a fixed mindset, but sort of like I know so much history that like if somebody's like, hey, we should do this, I'll be like, oh, I remember in 1942 when we tried that and it didn't work. And so it's almost like a reaction.
Yeah.
So once again, kind of remembering that it might work this time because the world is different.
That
Yeah.
fixed mindset can get you that way, and I think that's what really interests me about that Harvard stuff. And like if you're going into it with that fixed mindset, it prevents you from learning from your mistakes,
Yeah.
right? And that's really interesting because it's like, well, we tried it once and it didn't work. Well, can we improve it? Like, can we learn from our mistakes? Yeah, yeah.
And Kate says that wild ideas are welcome, and getting to scale is part of the fun of innovation.
Oh, nice. I love that. So what, one thing that we didn't script here, Karen, but I'm going to ask because I'm always interested in this, is sort of like what helps to get from a fixed to a growth mindset? What is the quickest way from a fixed to growth mindset? And I'll tell you my answer, and then I'll tell you other answers I've heard to this, but I'd love to see in the chat if anybody has ideas of like, imagine the circumstance in your work environment and what would shift it into more of a growth mindset. And then we'll kind of get through the others a little bit more quickly because we're spending a little bit of time on this, but I think it's kind of one of our favorite, Kieran and I's favorite topics.
It's a great question.
Expand our growth mindset.
And people are typing. So sharing successes seems to help even if they're small. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Asset-based, normalizing mistakes. Yeah. And so go ahead, Kieran.
I was going to say, I know like when I'm dealing with patrons, when they come in with that kind of like, especially around technology, I have to say, that fixed mindset of, like, I don't know how to do it. I'll never know how to do it. Or like, kind of, they've already gotten there. If I can get them to where they're curious again, or that they're okay with being confused, and that, there's like techniques to do that, but that helps kind of get them back into that growth mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Inquiry and curiosity can really move people into a growth mindset. And then humor is another thing that can disrupt fixed mindset and get people kind of thinking more expansively. So since you mentioned it, let's go on to on the stage now, on the stage with the in the library. What can we do to help our library users to approach their use of the library with a growth mindset? And again, feel free to use the chat area for this. And Kieran's already made a really good example. Do you have any others, Kieran?
Yeah, I think I do use humor. I might have on one occasion or another used humor. Yeah.
One of the things that, this is Christine, and one of the things that I think of is every time somebody asks me a question at the reference desk, I would be sort of like, oh, that's a great question. Let's see what we can find together, because I think it can be very intimidating to ask a question. People feel sort of like they should already know all the things. And so if it's sort of like, we're going to figure it out together, then I'm not some like, all-knowing being. We're going to go on this adventure together.
Right, because it's always better with a buddy.
Well, and it's first of all, you're like validating them. Like, what a great question. I'm curious about that too. And then doing it together really does kind of show your commitment to their interests. I think that's wonderful. And sometimes I do reframing. So if somebody comes up and is like, I can't find, like how can we use language to basically restate where they're at, but in a more kind of growth possibility oriented way, or provide more options or do other things to kind of open things up rather than kind of shut them down. So really great comment from April. Makerspaces seem to be a good opportunity as patrons can try something new in a low stakes environment. And that's what I was thinking, April. It's like you're a mind reader. And this picture is actually from a makerspace in a library where a community is putting together a quilt for somebody in the community. And they all are like coming into the library together and making this quilt.
That's really awesome.
We welcome your other thoughts. We're going to move on to the next lens.
Right. So we're going to have a little poll here. This is our marquee part of it. And we just want you to kind of consider, like, what's your perception of the community's perception of the library? You know, what's the value of the library to the community as a center of growth or collaboration? So to what extent, when the poll goes up, to what extent does your community think of the library as a center for growth and learning?
I always love watching the poll go.
Yeah.
That's fun.
All
We're
right.
kind of hoping to get a few more answers here. People are like trying to decide, right?
And it's possible if they're attending by phone, they might not be able to access the poll.
Oh.
So
I'm glad to see that some folks associate the library with growth and learning.
Yeah, we're really only seeing 5 answers, so we encourage you to go ahead and let us know. Maybe we ought to broadcast the results. What do you think, Christine?
Yeah, might as well.
sorry, they are.
Oh, cool.
Oh, there it is. Thank you. So looks like some folks think of the library that way. For those of you who answered that question, which is just helpful to think about, sort of like, how do people perceive us? How do we want them to perceive us as these values get as these trends roll out? So now for a commercial break. This is a reminder of our handy trends analysis technique. Notice a trend.
Oh, hey, look, there's a trend over there.
Number 2, understand how another industry is moving forward with the trend.
Man, the hardware store is really using that trend well.
Now, think of the trend in the 3 library lenses behind the scenes.
Can we catalog this? It's not gonna fit on the shelf.
On the stage.
All right. Let's have Betty come in. She's really good at this trend. I think Betty would do an awesome program about this trend for our community.
And on the marquee. This is like a test.
I think if we use this trend, a little different than how the hardware store is doing it, we could kind of like get it out there a little easier.
Yeah. You know what I want to do? It's like, I want to do like pictures and stories from our makerspace and do an article in the newspaper so people start to really see how the makerspace is used and that we're a place for learning and growth.
Absolutely.
All right. Are we ready for another trend? Drum roll.
I'm ready for another trend.
Guest experience. Now this comes really out of the for-profit world, where a lot of businesses are trying to garner loyalty, customer loyalty, so that there's repeat use of their product or service, right? So what this looks like is making things really easy for people to use the product or the service, having an unexpectedly delightful experience for them, like Disney does, connecting others to this sense of belonging, so maybe some kind of personalization of the service, and providing a meaningful experience, so people really feel like it's not just going to do the thing, but it's actually an experience instead of just like customer service. It's a guest, and where you're special,
Right.
and an experience where there's empowerment, and all of this is being done pretty systematically in the business sector to increase use over time and to sustain it.
Right. Like I know my grocery store does a lot of these things. I have my little like loyalty card so that I type in my phone number and I get a percentage off stuff, and they send me really personalized coupons because if I bought something, they tracked it. I mean, it's a little Big Brotherish, but um in this example here is a Dutch supermarket, grocery store. And what they've developed was a slow lane, which I think is pretty interesting. Um, they realized, and how they market it is like, if your day can be improved by having a quiet conversation, please use our slow lane. And the cashiers in these lanes are like, they even are trained to to do chit chat and small talk. Um, and it does take a little longer, but and it's not like, have a seat and tell me your life story. It's just, a little more human than the self-check lane or the like, I've just come in here for one item. Let me get out of here without talking to anybody. So, how would this look in libraries? Like in libraries, this might look like
Well, let's
services.
sorry.
Yeah. Uh,
Let's
okay, go ahead. Sorry.
Oh, well, we're going to have you guys come up with this. So we're going to pull up, Christine's going to pull up 3 different windows. One is for behind the scenes, which again is sort of like how you work together back of house. And then one is on the stage, what this trend of guest services looks like for serving people. And then the third is on the marquee, like if how can you help others to recognize the library as a really quality service experience, or experience really, where people feel a sense of belonging. So Christine, do you need to describe how to do this, or?
It works very similar to the chat box in the lower left. So each individual box down at the bottom, there's a type here. And so you can type specifically to behind the scenes, on the stage, or on the marquee as you need. And April, I was thinking about your comment about for self-checkout machines in the library, those are kind of the express lanes. So the traditional circ checkout could be the slow lane, and it actually might be beneficial for both patrons and staff because, patrons might want just to be able to chit chat, but also, in my opinion, that if everybody who has things working well is using the self-checkouts, that means that staff who are manning the circulation desk are dealing primarily with problems. And that can be a lot to handle in a day. So maybe a slow lane might be a good idea. And I do see a couple people typing in the other boxes.
Yeah, that's great. So we welcome you to add to any of them. I think, Karen, go ahead with your example now on what it would look like. Just wanted to get to this screen where people can type in.
So yeah, it might look like services geared towards the community, like community wellness, and it might look like community connection. Like I think of book clubs and story times, things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Like story time, where it's like in every week and people get into the habit of it and kids get excited every week to go. That really is a way of kind of creating that guest experience. All events really create that guest experience. sort of from behind the scenes, I'm interested in what people are typing right now, but I've been thinking about it from the perspective of the belonging part of this and the unexpectedly delightful part of it. And like, how can we create kind of activities among our coworkers that are a little bit joyful and unexpected? Like Kieran has this like joke calendar, and he's always sharing jokes with us when we're meeting. And it's just kind of makes it a more interesting experience to do our work together.
Right. And on the stage, like how can we, you know, what services would help shift that kind of to build more loyalty, to build that kind of uh, community-centered library?
So Shauna put that they have this one-to-one tech help that's offered. And what a great way to connect with people individually and customize that experience for them as they learn technology. So thank you for that. And then April's got that idea that you can talk to a live person. So many people get frustrated with technology and machines or the automated phone guide. So absolutely, like the library provides this customized service where you know the person, you know your librarian.
Press 1 if you're having trouble with your password. I like that behind the scenes. A couple people have typed there. Yeah, support.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Kate. That's absolutely.
So yeah, I appreciate that. What Kate's saying about sort of like, you know, we always are so busy and so scheduled, and this idea of a slow lane for staff to kind of reduce burnout, where there's some spaciousness and healthful, you know, kind of moments and wellness and lunch and breaks and just general learning and time to connect and learn about each other and from each other on a more personal level. That's part of that sense of belonging. Thanks, Kate.
Hallway conversations. Yeah, I used to try to have what I called water cooler moments with people, even because I've worked at a distance from my coworkers, and there's, got to be strategies to get to know folks and to care about who I work with and the folks.
There's something about that walkabout too that's kind of helpful in sort of getting away from something, and then an idea might hit you when you're actually off doing something else.
Yeah.
Oh, I think that's interesting, Kate, that you had experience zones where you used to work to increase fun and play behind the scenes. I love the spaciousness of some of these examples that are kind of internal behind the scenes, right? Like adding additional time for the staff to just snack and just talk before meeting starts, so that there can be just like a little bit of break between what happened before and people don't walk in all stressed out.
Right.
That's great. Well, we invite you to continue to think about this as an opportunity. And we're going to move on now to other
Alright.
trends.
There we go. So let's kind of look at these 4 trends here. AI in libraries. I mean, you have the problems and the potentials of improving reference, communication, workflow. Um, I recently asked Chat GPT to help me with an Excel spreadsheet formula. It was wonderful. Um, I also want to remind you that there's if above the chat box, trends handout if you want to download that field guide. It's a fillable PDF, and there are some worksheet pages and a summary of AI and example questions for all of these trends, actually.
Yeah, and I think the description of the artificial intelligence is pretty helpful. We actually pulled that from a resource that we have listed on the back page as well. And then another trend that is no surprise to anybody is the political divisiveness in our society. And so, what does it look like to surmount that behind the scenes? But also, like we're seeing a lot of libraries doing more kind of meaningful conversations where there's some structure around it and people get to voice their differing opinions in a way that's respectful. And as those kinds of conversations are going on, the library starts to become perceived of as a place where everybody's voice is welcome, or at least people can be somewhat respectful. So I think actually from the marquee perspective, like a lot of organizations are contacting libraries, whether it's on campus or in the community or at a national and certainly at a state level, to sort of say, how can we leverage libraries to be the place to help have more respectful dialogue, and try to move people locally forward to work together rather than feel at polar opposites.
Right. So climate change, again, this is like those long-term shifts in temperature and weather patterns, um, manifestations of greater frequency of like hurricanes and earthquakes and tornadoes and blizzards and droughts and wildfire and all those lovely things, along with you know the accelerated use of microplastics and fossil fuels and oh man, this is depressing. But so like how can we change our internal library functions? Is there a way that we can help our libraries be a little greener? How does that look like in library service? And how will our community perceive that value?
Now, I've been really impressed by libraries that do kind of building projects where they use alternative sources like geothermal or things like that, and then they
Yeah.
become sort of or they're LEED certified or whatever, and then that kind of brings that technology to the local community and
Mhm.
helps people locally who are construction workers to learn those technologies in a way that it becomes a model for others in the community.
Yeah.
And then, of course, social justice is and continues to be a really important part of our society and our world. And with there's various things to unpack about that, but like just having behind the scenes, representation and kind of a welcoming and belonging place for a variety of different people that represent different parts of the community that is served, and maybe even in proportion to the folks of different types, as well as sort of what does it look like to provide services in a way that are just and inclusive to all, and shifting policies and those kinds of things in order to make for a more just library. And then to what extent do others in the community perceive the library as a just and inclusive place? Like, what's the marquee on that one with that trend? So these are 4 that we picked out, and we've tried to use the example of those 3 lenses. And so we're going to do another whiteboard activity with this. So we're going to clear off this whiteboard, and Christine's going to put up your marker again. If you feel like your library is doing pretty well at one of these, please use the green color to mark up this. And if you feel like your library could benefit from doing more in this area, in one of these areas, please use the red.
Is there a way to clear off the old one?
Christine is looking.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. The allow pointer. I feel like if I click on some weird button, it's going to make everything go away. There has to be.
Okay, I think I found it.
Did you?
Well, I got part of one. There we go. Yeah, I think I got it. I'm just slow at it.
Are you erasing?
Oh, there we go.
There's probably a quicker way to do this.
There's got to be a clear. Pardon us. Pardon
Yeah,
me, Matt.
don't erase the ones that are adding their check marks now.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
Yep.
No, that's all right.
All right, we'll just go forward.
Sorry about that.
But that's cleaner. Yeah.
So if you added your check mark and we accidentally deleted it, try adding it again.
We may or may not have made a mistake, but we're learning from it.
We are growth mindset.
Yeah. We'd love to kind of, see your, see where you feel like you've got some strengths and areas where you might want to dig a little deeper. Artificial intelligence looks like an area for growth mindset to discover a little bit more about artificial intelligence. Absolutely, it's rolling out in ways that we can't always predict where it's going. And so that might be a sustained growth mindset over time. Climate change also seems to be an area that some people want to do more growth. And then the strengths in political, tackling some of the political divisiveness in your area and in being a more just organization and place for people in your community. That's phenomenal.
Yeah. I think some of the political divisiveness, like the challenging of books and stuff like that, most of the libraries that I'm seeing respond are that I've heard of are responding in really creative and good ways for their community and taking it as a real growth opportunity. I've been really excited to see that.
You certainly part of the political divisiveness in some ways is the book challenges, which we've seen a lot of. So I don't know whether your green check marks are that you've had challenges or you've dealt with them well, but hopefully you. Okay, good. Good to know. Thank you, Shauna.
I think I just saw something on, I think it was LinkedIn today, and I have no idea who posted it. But talking about, somebody had posted an article, I think, about how a library, can't remember where, was responding to book challenges in a way that like helps them explain how they do collection in the first place, and so that it's not a mystery. And like some people might be really curious in how the books are selected, no matter what their political stance. And so I thought that was really interesting. It's just sort of like being more transparent and, this is how we buy the books and this, all of these things that people might be really interested in. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And that gets to the marquee, doesn't it? Like public perception of this, like the rigor with which we do our work. Thank you, Christine. So we're going to move on to the next one, and hopefully our little whiteboard won't join us on the next one. So we're going to wrap up. We'll leave some time for questions at the end or other comments, so please add those in the chat area. But just to reiterate, we've identified some trends that are impacting libraries: artificial intelligence, climate change, and there's like emergency procedures and things that more libraries are doing now. Book challenges, as we said, social justice, growth mindset, and guest experience, moving from customer service to guest experience and that hospitality model. And we really encourage you to kind of start investigating more trends, which Karen will get to in a second. But when you're investigating, you hear of things, kind of using those various lenses of the aperture, looking at library operations, and does this impact how you can improve your operations, looking at services and seeing if this in some way can be more beneficial to the people you serve, and looking at it also in terms of, and we should never forget about, that public perception of the value of the library and how do we leverage certain trends. Like, I just want to give kind of a shout out to Susie Tanini, who works at the Colorado State Library, for really seizing artificial intelligence for the school libraries and really encouraging school libraries to be leaders in rolling out artificial intelligence and searching with using AI systems for schools, so that the school library can really be the agents of change around leveraging artificial intelligence with kids as they do research and writing and other things that they do in their schoolwork.
All right. And again, I hate to sound like a broken record. Please download that field guide on the, gosh, what is it? I think the 10th page of the handout. There's some resources and reference materials that we've listed. And you can kind of see that a little bit on the slide, but it's bigger and easier to read in the handout, I swear. And to kind of identify those trends that we didn't cover, you can look at the American Library Association has a Center for the Future of Libraries. The Colorado Association of Libraries has a Futurist Interest Group. There's other great organizations like Living Room Conversations, Pew Research Foundation, stuff like that. And if anybody has a place where they often look for trends, if you want to put that in chat, that would be awesome for all of us.
Yeah, we'd love to hear your thoughts. And so as we wrap up, we want to thank you for your not just attending, but also engaging in this conversation about trends. It's an ongoing topic. And we'd love to, if you want to put in chat any suggestions or any questions you have for us, we'll stick around. And this is what we look like.
For better or worse. For better or worse.
Right.
Yeah,
My hairline is trending.
And we do have plenty of time for questions. So feel free to pop those into chat. And while people are typing, I'm just gonna, I will move back to Sharon and Kieran's slides in case you also want to chat with them. But while you guys are thinking of questions or comments, I want to thank everyone for attending today, and we would love your feedback about today's session. You can either click on the URL on the screen, it's a live link, or I will pop it into chat as well. And I'm also going to pop my email into chat in case you need a certificate for today's session. So if you need a certificate, I also popped my email into chat. You can just shoot me an email and let me know. And then the playbook, or the field guide, I should say, as well as the archive of today's session will be available in probably an hour or so on Libraries Learn. And I'll pop that into chat as well. And then I will go back to, Sharon's slides. You have their contact information. But yeah, any thoughts or questions that you guys might have?
Poverty and mental health issues, yeah.
Thank you very much for pointing that out. Shauna, that is, they're two different things, right? Like, but they definitely overlap. There's a lot of research on sort of the gap, the wealth gap, and also mental health issues. And I think definitely it's interesting to think about how libraries play a part in providing resources for people, everyone, and helping people to access services that they may not be aware of, and offering hope and possibility in a lot of ways. Christine does this great program on hope. So there are a lot of ways that libraries could jump into those trends. So thank you for pointing those out. And I think that in some cases there is a back of house issue with that, for sure.
And April is wondering if we can give another example of a trend that showcases the difference between how to think about behind the scenes and on the stage and on the marquee.
Sure, yeah. Well, let's take mental health, for example, or do you have an idea, Kieran?
No, I was thinking we could do mental health.
Yeah, okay. So again, behind the scenes is the internal culture and functioning and operations of the library. And so what can we do for our employees to help sustain and bolster their mental health? And what things in the organization or in the environment might be contributing to them feeling overstressed or in other ways taxed to their mental health, and identifying those and reducing those kinds of things that are problematic and stressful for people. That's my thoughts on that one. What do you think, Kieran?
Yeah, I was thinking, how that library culture is, and how folks work together and support each other
Mm-hmm.
also, and letting it be okay to work together and support each other.
Yeah, absolutely. And to kind of work it out loud in some ways, so that mental health is talked about and addressed in a variety of different ways.
Mhm.
And then, so the distinction between that back of house and on the stage is really about the customer experience, right? It's about when people come in to use our libraries, or when they come online to use our libraries, because a lot of them, I'm an online user of libraries. What are the people that we serve, and how does this trend relate to them? And what can we do as an organization within the confines of what libraries do to
Right.
actually address that issue? So in the case of mental health issues, we can't provide counseling, but we can provide direct support for other provide links to support for other people. Or so it's kind of systematically setting up services and structures and resources in a way that people in the community who might be experiencing mental health issues can get this help and support they need.
Right, and in those customer service moments, I know, there's a lot of overlap between a bartender and a librarian, because people want to corner you and tell you their problems, and getting out of that in a professional way, getting out of that just for your own mental health sake, if or because you have other things to do, um, having something like that, a private space or a telehealth booth, or a way that, especially I'm thinking small and rural libraries, folks can connect with professionals. I know in my community there's not a lot of opportunity or mental health services available, and so being able to provide a place that they can connect online to services, or even just a private place where they can phone those numbers that you've given them on that really handy ready reference sheet you already made.
Yeah, and I think there's ways that libraries are actually proactively supporting mental health, right? Rather than just intervention, like book clubs, cool programs, volunteer opportunities. All of these things are designed to really encourage people to feel well-being, a sense of well-being, contribution, joy. There's a lot of research on things that increase people's sense of well-being, and libraries are carrying more of those books and really kind of doing the proactive kind of engagement with people in order to reduce loneliness and other things that contribute to mental health concerns.
Yeah, this is in the marquee, and I think they're kind of talking about it in chat over here, that partnerships might fit on the marquee.
I think that the marquee is like how other people perceive the library, right?
Mm-hmm.
How the community, how high-level stakeholders, how other people do that. And I think often we work so hard to do things, but we don't let other people know. So part of this is awareness, but also it's education in a way that helps people to have more of a perceived value for the library and really understanding what we're doing. So it's not enough just to be awesome. We have to let people know in a way that they understand that what we're doing is awesome. So, and that might be in this case, like partners going, the libraries does so many strong things. We're going to reach out and partner with them. Or it might be in some cases, and this happened during the pandemic, the county commissioners reaching out to the public library and saying, we have all of these homebound seniors and we're concerned about them. What can the library bring to those homebound people? And the library started more direct services, calling people and engaging them and being involved. And so it's sort of like, can the community, whether it's a college campus or a community or a high school or whatever, those people who are in that community that perceive the library in a way that is beneficial in addressing that trend and are proactive.
Did that help, April?
Oh, great.
Okay, cool.
We have just a couple more moments. Any other last questions or final thoughts? It was great to see everybody today. And just an FYI, our next CSLN session, Autism is Welcome Here, will be on Tuesday, February 27th at the normal time, noon Colorado time. So join us for that. Once again, the archive as well as the playbook will be available on Libraries Learn in probably just about an hour, and I had placed my email in chat if you need a certificate for today's session. But if we don't have any additional questions, I want to thank Kieran and Sharon for this fabulous session and getting us all thinking about all of the different ways we can think about trends. And how we can keep an open mind about some of them as we go through. And I want to thank everybody for really engaging and participating today. And I hope everybody has a really great rest of your afternoon.